Hi, I'm Hassan, the lecturer here at the Institute of Medical Education, and today we're going to take a look at solutions to Section 3 of ACE's GAMSAT Green Booklet, Practice Test 1, specifically Unit 28, questions 87 to 91. And in this unit, we've been presented with a model that accounts for unique observations describing cockroaches when they're in motion. So you might have looked at this and been like, what the hell is going on? But let's just be systematic here. So the key to solving these questions is by employing pattern recognition. So a lot of it is just trying to understand where the arrows are going, what excitation is, what inhibition is, what's an extensor, what's a flexor, what's a flexor burst generator, what are all these things. So you just have to look at the graph carefully, so in figure 1, and just understand where the arrows are going. So just take note of points P to Y and the elements that they trigger. Pay close attention to their excitatory and inhibitory actions. And some other important thing to consider, which is told in the stimulus, is that the flexor burst generator, it's a group of nerve cells that act like a pacemaker, so they don't need CNS command to work. So the swing phase, what is a swing phase and what is a stance phase? So swing phase is when the foot is off the ground, and stance phase is when the foot is on the ground. So those are some key points you need to make sure you get your head around before we dive into question 87. So if we take a look at the first question, so 87 says, of the following, the elements that most directly trigger, so that's important to understand, that most directly trigger a switch from swing to stance are. So if we take a look at the diagram and the options available, so let's say it says here the cuticle stress receptors. So the cuticle stress receptors, well, if you take a look, we're trying to directly trigger from swing to stance, which means we have to try to activate our extensors. So the cuticle stress receptor, well, you have to go through the flexor burst generator, and then from the flexor burst generator, you have to go to the extensors. So, but even then, the cuticle stress receptor is just inhibiting the flexor burst generator. So that's obviously going to be incorrect. So it means that the flexor burst generator is more downstream. So I think that's, if you go have a look at the flexor burst generator, which is option D, you can see that it itself inhibits extensors, which is what we don't want. But if you do want to activate the extensors, you have to go through the flexors, which goes through hair receptors that activates extensors. So that means if we're going to go through the flexors, then the hair receptors, so the flexor burst generator is incorrect, and the flexors is incorrect because the last point, so the last train stop, if you will, has to be the hair receptors. So that's why B is the correct answer, because it's asking you for the most directly triggering from swing to stance. So you can see from the hair receptors, it's using the R to U pathway to activate extensors. So 87 is going to be B. So if we take a look at question 88, 88 is asking, when the central command neurons are stimulating the flexor burst generator during the swing phase, and impulses travel past point S, so keep that in mind, which of the following would be actives? So let's take a look at our point S. So let's trace. So point S, we can see that we're going to arrive at T, so the flexors, and we're going to arrive at V, which is the extensors. So we can see that S is innervating activation of the flexors, so it's going to be excitation via T, and it's also innervating inhibition of the extensors, so the stance phase, via V. So the answer, therefore, for 88 is going to be T and V only, which is C. So you can, this one was a bit, it required you just to take a close look at where the lines are going. So if you could do that, I know in the GAMSAT, you might be a bit stressed for time, but again, just follow the lines, I guess follow the yellow brick road and you'll get your answer. So that's the answer for 88. So 89 is asking us, of the following situations, nerve impulses pass point S at the most frequent rate. So this is asking us, where is it going to pass point S most of the time? So let's look at all the options. So it's saying here when impulses from the cuticle stress receptor are most frequent. So let's say cuticle stress receptor. Well, not really, because cuticle stress receptor is going to inhibit the flexor burst generator. So it's going to dampen the S phase. So that's going to be incorrect. So A is going to be incorrect. B, when impulses from the hair receptors are most frequent. So let's take a look at the hair receptors. So hair receptors, well, again, it has to dampen flexor burst generator to get to S, and it's going to dampen the S, so B is going to be incorrect. So remember, we're looking for impulses at pass point S at the most frequent rate. So if we take a look at C, it says in the middle of stance phase. So middle of stance phase. Stance is going to be the extensors, and again, it's going to be inhibiting extensors. So that's definitely not going to be it. But if we take a look at D, 89 says for D, in the middle of swing phase, and we can see clearly that in swing phase, S is innervating T to activate flexors. So therefore, if the question's asking nerve impulses are going to pass point S the most frequent rate, I mean, you could argue C and say the stance phase, but it's not going to be as frequent as the nerves firing to have the swing phase. So it's going to be from S to T for the flexor activation. So therefore, the answer is going to be D. So now if we take a look at question 90, question 90 asks, if the nerve pathways were cut through at point W, extension would or could. So point W is the central command neuron. So this is important. We don't need the central command neurons as we were told in the stimulus. Remember, the flexor burst generator can act as a pacemaker. So it doesn't need the central nervous system command. So the first flexor burst generator itself can actually innervate. Where we go. So it can innervate the extensors via the RS pathway if it activates flexors and hair receptors. And you can also inhibit the V pathway that directly dampen stance phase through the V pathway. So you can see that through T, U, and V pathways, we can definitely initiate and terminate our nerve signals using the flexor burst generator, even if we cut off W. So we can actually activate and inhibit our extensors because the flexor burst generator can work as a pacemaker. So your answer for 90, therefore, is going to be C, initiated and terminated. So now if we move on to the last question, it's asking us, the load is removed from a leg at the end of the stance phase. So remember, end of stance, so the load is removed, so the foot was on the ground, and now it's going to be foot off the ground, so the swing phase. So of the following, the most immediate increase in the rate at which impulses travel past a point, of the following, the most immediate increase in the rate at which impulses travel past a point occurs at. So if we take a look, so since the load is removed, I mean, you can say there's no need for extension and extensors anymore. So we don't need the extension and extensors. So if we take a look at what's happening, both X and W and U are activating extensors. So if we look here, so XW, so in our options, we've got A and C, which are X and U. So A and C are incorrect because if we're obviously removing the load, we don't need extension anymore. We don't need extensors. So we can see X and U, they're activating the extensors. So we don't need that. They're out of the way. So we're going to look at Y and V. So Y, if we look at Y inhibits flexor burst generator. So let's take a look. So yep, it inhibits the flexor burst generator, and that dampens flexors required for the swing phase. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to dampen the swing phase because if we removed the stance phase, we want to jump into the swing phase. So obviously Y is going to be incorrect as well. So get rid of that. So why is the answer D? Well, because the V pathway, it directly inhibits. So the V pathway, take a quick look, it directly inhibits the extensors to dampen the stance phase. And if we're dampening the stance phase, that facilitates the swing phase. So that's why the answer for 91 is D. So with this sort of, question, it's impossible to study for this. A lot of this is just pattern recognition and just following the dots, follow the yellow brick road, and make sure you don't get confused with what the symbols represent. So if you still have more questions about this unit, you can post them in the comment section below, or you can contact us directly. We'd love to help. Thanks for your time. Bye now.